All right, traders, welcome to a big week. It is Monday, November 2nd, and this is your end of day recap for the day. So, we'll talk about today's price action. Interesting day. We'll kind of go over some of these things that I think were a bit interesting for the day. Let's start always with I always start with the performance for the day, and then kind of dig into some of the moves that happened in sectors, and then into individual names and themes. By the way, we are having a member webinar today, 5:30 Eastern today. So in just about 45 minutes. Anything on the webinar, anything on the value areas, right? So it's the indicator that we use. We do this webinar for members every right around the first of the month or the first business day of the month because we have new value areas for the month. So this is the Market Webs indicator that we use a lot in our trading, and we'll be looking at what the trends are kind of telling us and what the new value areas are telling us. So that'll be in 45 minutes. If you're not a member, go ahead and sign up. Right? It's $150 a month to be a member at Tribeca Trade Group. But I think even just attending the webinar, I think you get a lot of value out of it. We do that obviously, and you could kind of see our schedule of what we do on a daily basis. There's a lot of dialogue. Like today was a busy day. We do pre-market at 9 o'clock in the morning. I kind of give my feel for what I think is going on in the market. Then we go over charts. We do the same thing Monday, Wednesday. We also kind of do it Friday too, and anything else that's going on. And then over the weekend, I give my insights too on, what's going on above the hood, which I refer to as price and trend, which I think are most important. And then as well, we do, we look at single stocks, and I'll go over my new watch list as well that I put out, which is more like stocks that I'm watching this week versus an actual actionable list, because I do think this week it's a little bit different, right? We know that things might shake up a little bit in the middle of the week. And I hope, as a lot of events, I like to fade some of these events that everybody's so concerned about. And hopefully they'll provide a buying opportunity. So let's dig into the price action. I didn't even get there yet, but SPY finished up 1.1%. Interesting, the change throughout the day. Zero. It's kind of like we've been seeing, right? Without even going into what the Nasdaq did, which underperformed, only finished up 20 basis points for the day, sold off through the session, but kind of bend but didn't break for the day. And IWM was the performer for the outperformer for the day, up 1.8%, and it did rally opposite of what the Qs did for the day. So we'll look at some of these relationship charts. Bonds were up, but no major movement during the session. And the VIX did sell off today a little bit. So came in a little bit, but still, a relatively high level at a 37, right? So, yeah, I think before we kind of get into the charts and into some of those individual sectors and so forth, this market for now, and we don't know when this changes, but it kind of continues to be, sell these rips, wait for a little bit of a dip, look to kind of counter a little bit. And then also, even on that counter trade, if you're playing to the long side, then you have to take profits pretty quickly. It is really difficult to find names that are trending, right? I think a couple areas did trend for the day, but it's a little bit of, I think if I were to kind of categorize what we're seeing over the last week with some of these moves, is some of the under-owned areas are getting rotated into. And I think it's almost like a leveling out across sectors, right? Some of those sectors that have been crowded and where people have been hiding in because they've worked so well, right? Like an Amazon or like a Zoom Video. Those names are seeing people are taking profits in those names, right? And they're moving into some under-owned areas. So it's almost like people are almost like rechecking back to either making sure that their portfolio isn't really overweight any particular areas. And if they want to play a theme, maybe they are kind of putting a little bit more money towards something like that, something like clean energy or something like the pot stocks, right? So we'll go over a couple of those in just a minute, but I want to, as always, go over the technicals of the S&P. We'll do that with the Nasdaq and small caps really quickly too, but I usually spend a little bit more time on the S&P. So we talked about in yesterday's video that we opened up below value. Yeah, we're going to have to get we're going to have to get through some resistance, right? So not to say that it can't be done. Right now, we're right in the middle of the value area for the week. So with all these events that you're going to be, everybody's going to be glued to their TV with the election and so forth, you have a roadmap in front of you of some decent levels to watch. You know that we're going to have resistance here at 3368, which is a decent portion up, right? And if we were to hit this in the short term, I would be selling into it, right? And then waiting to see what we do if we can kind of cross this bridge once we get to it. Because look at how things are lining up here. You have the 200 period moving average moving in, and it's also the top of value for the week, right? And again, these value areas, this is based on all the price, all the volume, and of course the time frame is a week of last week, right? So this is the important support and resistance from that time frame, right? From where we got the info, from the price and volume of last week, right? And again, going back to when we originally broke this uptrend here, we haven't come back and tested it. So I find it, unless it's going to be on very large volume, which it could be this week, we could break through this 3368. But I think this is going to be a short-term barrier. All right, so that's my plan for the week, is to kind of watch and see if price can get up to there, and then not be super greedy and just kind of see how it goes once we get up to there. Because that's a decent, that's 65 handles away. So that's a decent ways away if we can get up there. And then also, of course, this version point of control was taken out at the end of last week, and then 3225 is the level to watch to the downside. If that breaks, we do not have a lot of support, right? So that's where you're really you could look on this 1 hour chart. There's not much there. There's speed bumps, right? There's a Venom. There's a support 1 Venom down here again, which is an extension away from the value area. It's not major support. Right, and then if we back this up, and if we look at, we're probably going to hit this if price is going to move up, it's going to hit this 3342 resistance before that one on the 1 hour chart. So you've got a couple things that are lining up here that might be a little bit of a barrier for price to get into. On the downside, if the market wants to sell off, there's not a lot of rungs on the ladder to hold on to besides last month's low, and the 200 period moving average. So, unfortunately, just to be perfectly neutral and objective here, if you want to talk about the path of least resistance, it kind of seems like it would be to the downside, right? So I'm just looking at that and again trying to stay objective. We have a little bit of a bounce here, but I'm not really sold that just because the market was up today that's the new direction that we're going. We have a lot of levels to retake to the upside before I'm convinced of that. Also, if you're a fan of the moving averages, right, and if you don't have the value areas on your chart, notice that we're still below all the short-term moving averages, the 5, the 20, the 50 as well, right? So that needs to be, so from a confirmation standpoint, we have to get above 3342, 3368, and if you're just looking at moving averages, those 3 moving averages too, that tells you what kind of trend we're in. And right now we're in a short-term downtrend, right, until that takes place. So for me, and I'll switch over to the Qs here, but I will remain defensive until that happens, right? That is not, for me, like below the 50-day moving average, below value for the month, that is not a leg to stand on for me in terms of taking, initiative going long a bunch of things, right? Right. I want to be defensive. I want to be more defensive than being more aggressive, right? We also talk about the analogy of so I'll kind of just leave it there instead of giving you more analogies. But the Qs, they did hang on this this morning, it was a little bit touch and go for the Qs here, because they have 264.24 down here. If notice that we are below value, a different picture than the S&P, and that barrier is going to be 271.50 for the Qs. Right? If price cannot get above there, then yes, you have to worry about this, and then if that breaks, then this. So it concerns me, right, that we're not seeing that yet, and we just don't know, right? Like I said, I don't like to focus on these big events, but if that's what big institutions are worried about and not putting any money to work until they have more certainty, then it is what it is. All right, so also, let's go over to IWM. IWM is the wild card. It seems like it changes every week. A couple weeks ago, I was getting more bullish the small caps, and they failed. So they kind of did they fail miserably? I don't know. Maybe they were down decently last week, but they outperformed the other indices. So your resistance is 157.44. It would be really interesting if these got going and outperformed more than the S&P and Nasdaq. So I want to look at those relationship charts too. But yeah, so the barrier here is 157.44. Right, and that's also, just like there was two levels to watch for resistance in the S&P, there's also two levels to watch for resistance in IWM. Again, price can get through these levels. It should not be that major of an issue, but we do have to worry when we've got a resistance level in front of us, right? So we get above that 157 level, possibly fill this gap, and who knows? IWM, I'm not saying it can't happen. It did happen back in 2016, last election, where they did lead. So I'm open to these possibilities. So price action so I wanted to talk a little bit before I get into sectors. By the way, this PayPal, as I continuously jump around here, just gives you a sense, like, I don't think there's anything wrong with PayPal's numbers, but they're just getting beaten up. Like, nobody wants to be in these names right now. And I think this is kind of like a continuation from what we saw last week with names like Facebook and Amazon reporting. Those were good reports. So if you go through their numbers, I don't see anything that's particularly really negative here, but it just kind of shows you that you can't really argue with them doing this. It's, you could come up with reasons, but people just, for whatever reason, are just selling these names off, right? That's not a good sign for this group. It could tell you that maybe there's a little bit more downside to go and maybe not in PayPal, but in the overall group, right? If you look at names like Zoom, right, you got to let these things kind of just go where they're going to go, and then you want to see them, settle in a little bit. And right now, it's tough to kind of say that these are buying opportunities yet, right? We have to see them kind of consolidate and show. I think if Zoom gets above 475.22, that would be something that would get me, a little bit more interested, right? Not below value. Notice also there's a VPOC down here. Maybe this VPOC has to be taken out. There was a VPOC for Square that got taken out, right? But I still need to see the confirmation that the bottom is in, and I don't see that in this chart yet. All right, so let me talk about a couple of those relationship charts. Let me just switch to let's look at one that I haven't looked at in a while, which is IWM and the Qs. Right? We know that the Qs have outperformed for a while. Look at this base that's going on between IWM and Q. What's to say that IWM, if we look at this chart a little bit further back, 5 years, you could see that, why shouldn't IWM outperform here? And let's hope that there is more treatments for COVID, right? I think the Qs have been a place to gravitate into for the last months, because it's, number one, it's worked very well, but everybody knows that we're kind of in this new situation with COVID, but maybe this COVID gets under control either by natural forces or by science, right? By maybe there is a vaccine coming. And I think if that does happen, IWM could outperform the Qs a bit. So we'll see. That's not above the. I would watch that 50-day moving average. That's the the 200-day moving average for this relationship, and we'll see how that materializes. If you want to split it amongst value and growth too, and again, I'm not saying go long one versus the other unless you're really under. If you don't have any exposure, but again, I like to look for the quality names, and it doesn't necessarily matter too much if they're it has to. I don't want to say that it doesn't matter that they're not value and growth, but I want to just go with, in that value group, I want to go with the best performers there, and the higher quality names there. So let me just get this chart up. When we break apart value versus growth, small caps, it kind of looks similar, right? And I think this is trying to kind of move up here a little bit, right? So I think that I'm starting to give this the benefit of the doubt that there might be something here. I'm not jumping in with 2 feet, but I'm kind of just observing, right? Also, the industrials I thought were interesting today. We had a really nice ISM number that came out. And then we'll get into some other sectors. I did mention I'll talk about the pot stocks. We'll talk about those. But the ISM manufacturing number came in 59.3 versus estimate 56. That's a really strong number. So if you look at what did particularly well today, I mean, this is a nice looking chart for Deere. I did not jump into this trade today because I am playing a little bit more defense, but it's got to get above 232, right? So looking across different time frames, this will be one for me to watch tomorrow. Look at how bunched up it is, right? So there's a good example of how the 1 hour value area really kind of tells you a little bit of a story. I want to be long that if it gets above 232, right? And if you look at other things like Caterpillar, right, you could see the difference, right? Caterpillar all day long, trending higher, up 4%. All right, now this is hitting a little bit of resistance. I wasn't that fast, and I don't want to be super aggressive here, but right off the bat, right off the open, this got going and did very well. Honeywell's another one I'm watching, right? And I am long some of these names in the tactical portfolio, but I saw some people looking at Boeing today. I know Boeing is a whole nother situation. But here's what the industrial ETF looks like. It's trying to turn the corner. Here's what materials look like. Materials were up 3.3%. So, what we do here is we try to gravitate to wherever there's momentum. I don't care if it's growth, value. You can make money in any one of these things. One chart that I do like is this FedEx chart. This was up 2.9%, right? A lot of people have been looking for a pullback in FedEx. You got one. As long as this thing holds 265, I think a long is in play here. And it's right on the cusp of retaking these short-term moving averages. So that's one that I'm watching. It's not super expensive. The PE, if you look at that type of thing, is in the 20s. All right. And then, CGC got a lot of attention. I'll tell you, this group is really interesting because I don't really trade these stocks that much, but when they do get going, they tend to trend for the day. My issue is a lot of times they reverse after they fall apart right afterwards, and this is an election type trade. I would watch this level. If you like this trade, if you like this name for the long term, I have a level for you. It's 2120. That if it gets above 2120 by the end of the week, because this is a weekly bar, then it's very interesting. But until then, this is a day trade type thing for CGC, in my opinion. All right, so that group did outperform. What else outperformed for the day? Energy. Right, we did see some BP calls. This is a tough chart. This is one of those things that, hey, if it rallies and it is trying to get out of that this channel, and maybe hit some resistance here at 1684, right? But for some reason, I don't really know why, other than the explanation I gave in the beginning of the video, that it's just a rotation into some under-owned areas of the market. I think that's what you're seeing with a little bit of materials, a little bit of energy and a little bit of the banks as well were up, which were up 2.5% today. I did take a trade in this. I was not able to take a target in it, so I'm sitting with it. Morgan Stanley, was fine for the day, up 2.5%. I just wasn't able to get a target off. Here's my trades for the day. I had a nice positive day today, but again, really just you could see I didn't really do much. After like 11:20. I even try to hedge a position that I've got in low. What am I in? Low January calls. I sold some front week calls against it. Right around the high of the day. Yeah, I'm in January 175 calls. So, trying to kind of make sure, manage the few positions that I have on right now. I took some Baidu reports. But again, earnings, it's really difficult, I think, to play earnings right now, as we saw last week. So we'll see what Baidu does. I believe they report tomorrow morning. So, right, it's got a question mark there. It says 11:12 here. I thought Baidu was tomorrow, but maybe not. It says 11:06 here, so we've got a couple different dates. So maybe it's not tomorrow, but again, this thing, every trade has to be monitored and managed. It feels like right now in this tape. I was in just a stock position. It started to work, and this is what's been happening a lot. You get a couple targets, slim targets, by the way. And then then the name gets underneath your original price. So out of a day trade once that happens. Yeah, and I also took. I like this JD chart. It's still it has to prove it first. It does have to break out. So that's why I sometimes I will start a position and then add to it once I get the confirmation of a breakout. All right, guys, and that's it. So I think really what I'm trying to do here in the beginning of this week is just kind of watch to see what's taking place, right? Observe, and I kind of want to be cognizant if new leadership starts to materialize into some things, and more than just like a 1 or 2 day trend. Right, I want to see if we really start to see a movement into some of these under-owned areas, and then I think there's going to be opportunities. So it's one of those things where sitting tight right now, which is a difficult thing to do, but I think that's the right thing to do, because don't forget, we have a Fed meeting on Wednesday too. So another action-packed week. Have a great night, guys, and hope to see you in tonight's webinar.